Hey, back again. We're looking at a game between Peter Svidler with the white pieces versus Grandmaster Anish Giri with the black pieces. This is round four of the Tal Memorial. This is a nice instructive game. Also, let's get to it. Knight f3 by Svidler, c5, and this is a battle right here already of who's going to control the path of the opening. Gary wants to play some type of Sicilian setup or perhaps a symmetrical English. And let's see if Svidler obliges. So he plays g3 here, knight c6, bishop g2. And it's still possible to go into not play c4 at all, just castle and go into King's Indian attack territory. g6, and Svidler gives in. Now we have this symmetrical English variation. Okay, so c4, bishop g7, knight c3, d6, castle, e5. So here we see now Gary basically imbalances the position. We had a lot of symmetry going on. If you look at the white and black positions, everything looks pretty much the same, except this knight is not on f6 and this pawn is not on d3 yet. However, with this move e5, we already see an imbalance here in the position, and these type of moves lead to exciting games here. So already white has to be on the lookout for e5 at some point, maybe even ideas like f5, going into some type of stonewall Dutch position. But we have to acknowledge on the opposite side of things that black, for all intensive purposes, is basically giving the the d5 square over to white on the silver platter. And what is interesting is that that is one of white's major ideas in the English opening is the conquest and domination of d5. But here we see Gary just gives it to him. And what he does is he clamps down on the d4 square. So he gives up the e5 square, d5 square, but he clamps down on d4. And let's see how the game continued. a3, and that's usually how um, white plays against this. He moves the rook to b1 sometimes, and then he plays b4 and attacks the pawns in this manner. Knight ge7, again leaving the option open for f5, supporting the d5 advance. And this is like a Botvinnik variation, an old system that was played many years ago. There's d3, castles, and rook b1, as I said, with the idea of just playing b4 and pressurizing this structure. And notice the coordination, having the idea of opening the b file with continued pressure along the light squares. That's what the English opening is in its essence, is a light square opening, an attack on the light squares. You see all the pawns, everything's dedicated to the light squares for the most part, at least in the opening. That's one of the major themes: domination of one color complex early in the opening. And plays a5, and these are some committal moves because notice the white squares. He's giving white the white squares, right? But he's trying to control the dark squares. Bishop g5, right? Trying to weaken black's influence in the center here. Nice plays f6. He says, what the heck, my bishop is already blocked in by the e5 pawn. There's no harm in playing f6 to break this pin. Bishop goes back to d2. Bishop e6. And right here, d5 is being prepared. Knight e1. There's d5. And now we can see the counter attack black on the light squares. Note this pawn is threatened to capture twice. So c takes d5. Knight takes d5. This is a small victory for black here because white has given up some influence in the center here. So the battle still continues. It's queen b3. Notice this bishop is not protected at this point. And the battle for d5 continues, not with the pawns, but the pieces. Can white win this battle? So Giri plays knight c7. Now the bishop is protected. And notice this pawn is under attack also. And notice how Svidlers' moves all coincide with this attack on the light squares. Queen to b6. And notice that those pawn advances left some weak squares in the black camp. And this is what Svidler is trying to do, is basically exploit these weaknesses that were left behind by some of Giri's moves. Here he has an option to take the b7 pawn, but he stops at b6 and he's checking out the c5 pawn. Knight d4. So black's answer is tactical in nature. Again, consistent with this play, Giri again gives up light squares. He says, hey, take them. Knight f3. Let's play. Now, an interesting move to many. The interesting question, rather, is what goes on after queen takes c5. Well, what happens after queen takes c5, because I know inquiring minds want to know, is that the queen is no more after knight a6. Now looking at the position, you tell me where the white queen is going. That's right, the queen is trapped, and Svidler would immediately have to resign. The only move that's possible is queen takes f8. So there you have it. So be careful going around pawn grabbing with the queen. So this is a dangerous thing to do, even if your grandmaster is going around hunting pawns with the queen. And any beginner, is taught this, but sometimes, these guys have been playing for so long that, they know when they can break the rules, basically. So here we see Svidler going pawn grabbing, pawn hunting. But I just wanted to show you why queen takes c5 was not possible. So instead, knight f3 was played. And this move is dangerous also. Queen takes b7. Again, the queen comes under scrutiny. Rook b4. But after queen e4, It seems like that that perhaps white could get away with it, but black has tremendous compensation. So say after c4, I don't know, let's say queen e3 and f5, knight f3, knight b3. Black has tremendous pressure for that pawn, and I actually like black's. I like black's position better here. Again, you gain a lot of time chasing that queen around. So Svidler plays knight f3. This piece is very strong here. This piece is a monster. And we can see even access here because of the bishop. So white has to be careful here. Statically, white has a better position. When I say statically, I mean basically like the pawn structure. And if you were to magically remove the pieces off the board, you would prefer the white pawn structure better to black's, because black has a lot of holes in the pawn structure, and it would be right for picking in the endgame. But however, before the endgame, the gods have placed the middle game, and right now this middle game is very dangerous for white. Black has more space, pieces are active, and the white queen is basically being nosy in the section of the board where the queen really should not be at, in the middle game full of pieces. So after knight f3 was played, natural looking move, rook a6. Very natural looking move. Um, just basically attacking the queen, and Gary is saying, Gary is basically saying, hey, I do not care about this pawn. Take it. Because I don't know if it's preparation by Gary or just intuition that that queen is just going to end up in trouble snooping around for pawns. So I think that's definitely a good move on Gary's, good instincts on his behalf. So rook a6 was played, almost forcing the queen to capture. Queen, of course, the queen. Um, yeah, the queen really didn't have nowhere to go, so the queen was pretty much forced to capture. And here's a nice move by Giri. Can you see why this move is correct here? Again, it's all based on the position, the queen pawn grabbing. I saw this right away. So knight takes e2 was played. Svidler played king h1. That's already letting you know there's something wrong in the position, that he ends up with this isolated pawn and has to play this move. Again, it all goes back to this weakness in the position, which is the queen, being vulnerable to attack. So let me show you what happens real quick. Knight takes e2 check. If knight takes e2, then bishop d5. Again, attacking the queen, just entering onto a powerful diagonal. Again, let's ask the same question we did earlier. Where is the queen going? Queen is going nowhere. The queen is going to have to give itself up for the rook. And again, resign would be the option. So just the fact that these tactical options are available to black after 17 moves, this simply tells me that Svidler has made a wrong turn. So knight takes e2, king h1, knight takes c3 as the knight is now threatened to be captured. B takes c3, and bishop d5, and now the queen retreats. So now we could take an assessment of the position. um, and we had to say that black is better. Black is still more active than white. Black has more space, and black just has more prospects in the position. Let's continue. Queen A8, just bullying the diagonal. This is a valuable piece for black, excuse me, for white. So black would just love to simply just trade it off. Knight E1, great move by Giri. Rook D6. Notice that he's not real thirsty to try to trade it off, but now he's threatening the pawn. Right? He's putting pressure. He's putting pressure. He's improving his pieces and putting pressure on this pawn. So now, after bishop takes G2, check, knight G2, this pawn will drop. D4, and I always talk about small weaknesses. The rest of this game is based on a small weakness that Svidler has in the position. So D4. So he's trying to relieve himself of the weakness that was D3. So he goes D4. So look closely. Rook FD8. Notice the continued pile up in the position. Again, this pawn is fixed. You know, according to the principles of Nimzovich, first you want to fix the enemy object and then start piling up on it and attacking it. This is what's going on. So you see two rooks doubled up. This threat still exists, and these pawns will drop. But further than that, after rook fd8, this bishop is in danger also. For instance, this pawn cannot capture. Svidler would love to play d takes c5 or d takes e5, again relieving himself of the weakness. But then this bishop on d2 would be captured. King g1, now getting out of the check. C takes d4, c takes d4, easy. Bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, rook takes d4. Again, notice Gary didn't take with the pawn. He could have, but why create an isolated pawn? You know, why create the weakness? So that's not really Gary's style. Gary's real solid guy. Furthermore, besides taking on the isolated pawn here, it allows a square for this knight, you know, to pop back in to the game. Okay, so rook takes d4, and if you count the pawns, you just simply see that Gary is one a pawn, and that's basically what the rest of the game was just based. The whole game was based on. Actually, let's go back a little. Two main ideas. One was that early the fight for the light and dark squares by both players. Fiddler is fighting for the white squares, Gary for the dark squares, and subsequently Gary was willing to give up the light squares. Right? That was like the minor background theme. Then the major theme was Svidler going too far with the queen and the pawn hunting, with queen b3 and then subsequently queen b6 and then queen takes b7. Right? That was the major. That was like Act 1. You know, the minor act was the fight over the light and dark squares, and Gary taking on some weakness in the position, and in order to lure the queen, you know, into the position, which he did successfully. Gary provoked Svidler into taking on b7, and then next thing you know, his queen was attacked, and in order to defend his queen and get his queen out safely, then he was wind up taking on weakness on the d3 square, and then in the effort to relieve himself, he played d4, and then Gary dominated the file by doubling up the rooks. So that was like, acts 2 and 3 basically. First it was like that queen, those queen grab, the queen excursions, and then the weakness on d4, and the pawn was just unceremoniously captured. A rook takes d4, bishop c3, rook 4 d7, and basically from here on out it's consolidation time. It's just like the old song by Kool and the Gang, celebration time. It's consolidation time. And so all Gary is doing right now is just simply trading off pieces judiciously. Knight takes d5, rook takes d5, and Svidler shows great fight, but he's just down a pawn, and a healthy pawn too. There's no compensation, no counterattack, no nothing. So I'm moving through this phase of the game a little quicker, right? And we see the continued dominance of the file, and we see those past pawns being pushed. Svidler gives up that pawn for some activity, and again, Gary is just too solid for any kind of gimmicks or swindles to prevail here. Notice that he allows this pawn to be captured. So white has a choice. Let's say if white takes this pawn, then can you see it? I'll try to like hesitate for a second so you can see the move. Look at the bishop here, look at the rook here. Boom, f5, and it would be a wrap. That's why that pawn is not acceptable for capture. So instead, rook takes a5. Of course, Giri um, knows he's going to win this. King g2, attack, attack, attack. Queen e2. Other pieces coming down. Rook c5. Mean. This is mean right here. This is, man, guys are not playing. Discovery Central right there. Mean chess right there. King h2. And now the attack. Now it's an attack on the king. Right? This is the next act. Just attacking the king. Right? Using the majority, and not just trying to queen a pawn, but using the majority, the pawn majority in the middle game to attack the king. G takes f4. Queen e7. This is rough. This is rough right here. Right? This is rough. This is the kind of move that make you shake your head when you're on the other side. If you had the white pieces right now, you'd be shaking your head. If you had a bid, you'd be stroking your bid, because this is rough right here. Anyway, Svidler continues. Rook c4. Check. It's already resignable, but queen takes f4, just picking up more material. Queen takes e4. Check. King f3. More brutality coming up. Rook's on the 5th rank now, and you got all type of opportunities here. Queen d3. Attacking the bishop again. Rook e4, protecting the bishop. Rook to the second rank. Queen to c4. Check. Queen h1. attacking the bishop again. Poor bishop being attacked over and over again. What did the bishop do to deserve this? Queen e2, queen g1 check, king h3, rook b3 check, f3, and here comes the judge. G5 in the position on board. King F, Bishop F2. The bishop is fighting back. G4, King H4, Queen H2 check, and the end is near, my friends. King G5, and a nice little petite combination by Anish Giri here. Rook takes F3, and uh, Svidler resigned at this point. Can you see why he resigned? Well, let's take a look together. Right, we know enough to that we should be capturing pieces here. So the question is, what happens after queen takes f3? Well, G takes f3. And that's all she wrote. The queen would just be lost at that point. So with all of these threats here, bishop here, there's just so much. Um, for instance, if the rook try to defend up here, then this is open. Queen f4 would lead to mate. Um, so that's why GM Svidler had to resign. So again, just take with you from that game. That's just lesson in the main thing is don't go too far with the queen. You know, that's what happened in this game. That led to the further troubles down the road is those queen excursions. Starting from right here, I'm not saying this move is incorrect per se, but I'm definitely suspicious of queen b7, b6, and then the capture of this pawn here, because it seemed like black got in a whole bunch of trouble, after those moves right here, right there. Excuse me. So I hope you enjoyed that game. Please like and subscribe, and I'm gonna be looking at some more videos after that. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.